A warrior, a leader, and a name that still echoes across centuries, Salahuddin Ayubi. Known in the West as Saladin, he rose from humble beginnings to become one of the greatest military leaders in Islamic history. His courage, wisdom, and unshakable faith not only shaped the destiny of empires, but also earned him respect from both allies and enemies alike. This is not just the story of a conqueror, but a man whose justice and humanity turned him into a legend. Let's journey through his life, from childhood to his final moments. Salahuddin Ayubi, whose full name was Al-ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, was born in 1137 CE in Tikrit, Iraq. His father, Najm ad-Din Ayyub, was a noble Kurdish officer serving under Imad al-Din Zengi, a powerful ruler of Mosul and Aleppo. The family was not extremely wealthy, but they belonged to a respected military lineage. His early childhood was shaped by political unrest and constant movement. The day Salahuddin was born, his father's family had to leave Tikrit because of political tension, and they eventually settled in Mosul, later moving to Damascus. Unlike many warriors of his time, Salahuddin did not develop a passion for war from a young age. In fact, his early interests leaned more toward religion, knowledge, and administration. He was deeply inspired by Islamic scholars and the Quran, showing curiosity about theology and law rather than combat. His teachers noted his sharp intellect, humility, and calm nature. This balance of spirituality and discipline later shaped his leadership style. In Damascus, Salahuddin was allowed to study under some of the finest scholars of the time. He was introduced to subjects like history, science, and philosophy, but what left the deepest impression on him was the concept of jihad. Not just the battlefield struggle, but the greater jihad of self-discipline, justice, and protecting the weak. These teachings created the foundation of his moral compass. Family connections also influenced him deeply. His uncle, Shirkuh, was a respected general who served the powerful Zengid dynasty. Watching Shirkuh's military career exposed Salahuddin to the art of strategy and politics. Though he wasn't yet interested in becoming a warrior, destiny was preparing him for a greater role. In his youth, Salahuddin was often described as modest, soft-spoken, and even a little shy. Yet, beneath this calm personality, there was a sharp observer, someone who carefully studied people, leaders, and events around him. The Crusader invasions of the Holy Land were intensifying during this period, and the constant clashes between Muslim rulers and the Crusaders created an atmosphere that no young man of his time could ignore. By the time Salahuddin entered his teenage years, the seeds of leadership were quietly being sown. He absorbed lessons of governance from his father, military strategy from his uncle, and faith from his teachers. Little did anyone know, this boy who once leaned toward scholarship would rise to become a warrior who defended Islam and reshaped history. As Salahuddin grew into his youth, his path became more defined. Though he once preferred books over swords, circumstances drew him into military life. His uncle Shirkuh recognized his potential and took him under his wing. Through Shirkuh, Salahuddin entered the service of Nur ad-Din Zengi, the ruler of Syria and a devoted leader committed to uniting Muslims against the Crusaders. Serving under Nur ad-Din was a turning point. Salahuddin was introduced to real politics and battlefield strategies. At first, he was hesitant to embrace the harsh life of a soldier fully, but his discipline and intelligence helped him adapt quickly. He began accompanying his uncle on campaigns, learning how to command troops, manage resources, and plan sieges. His humility made him respected among fellow soldiers, while his faith gave him a reputation for sincerity and honesty. During this period, Salahuddin also learned the importance of unity among Muslims. The Muslim world at the time was fragmented, with rulers fighting among themselves instead of resisting the Crusaders. Nur ad-Din instilled in him the vision of a united Islamic front, and this vision became Salahuddin's lifelong mission. In 1163, Salahuddin joined his uncle Shirkuh on an expedition to Egypt. Egypt, though wealthy, was politically unstable under the Fatimid Caliphate. The Crusaders sought to control it, and Nur ad-Din saw its importance in the broader struggle. During these campaigns, Salahuddin's skills truly began to shine. He proved himself not only as a warrior, but also as a negotiator and administrator. His calm decision-making in tense moments impressed both his allies and rivals. After Shirkuh's death in 1169, Salahuddin, though still relatively young, was appointed vizier of Egypt. This was extraordinary. A man who once leaned toward scholarship was now ruling one of the richest lands in the Muslim world. Many doubted his ability, but Salahuddin surprised everyone. He skillfully balanced politics, suppressed revolts, strengthened Egypt's defenses, and gradually shifted its allegiance from the Fatimid Shura Caliphate to the Sunni Abbasid Caliphate. By the late 1160s, Salahuddin was no longer just a young commander. He was emerging as a statesman, a leader, and a symbol of unity. His reputation grew, and people began to see him as someone destined for greatness. By the 1170s, Salahuddin Ayubi had transformed from a quiet scholar-soldier into one of the most powerful leaders in the Islamic world. His rule in Egypt gave him resources and legitimacy, but his true mission was much larger: the unification of Muslims to stand against the Crusaders. His first task was strengthening Egypt. He reorganized its army, improved defenses, and secured its wealth. With Egypt stable, he turned towards Syria. After the death of his former master Nur ad-Din in 1174, Salahuddin marched into Damascus and took control. Over the next decade, he expanded his authority across Syria, northern Iraq, and Yemen, uniting Muslim lands under his leadership. For the first time in decades, the Islamic world was no longer fragmented. But his greatest test came against the Crusader states. Since 1099, Jerusalem and much of the Levant had been under Crusader control. Salahuddin knew that as long as the Crusaders held the holy city, peace could never be achieved. He carefully prepared, building alliances, training his armies, and ensuring supplies. Unlike many leaders of his era, he avoided reckless battles, preferring patience and strategy. In 1187, the moment arrived. The Crusader king of Jerusalem, Lusignan, along with the infamous Reynold of Chatillon, provoked Salahuddin by raiding Muslim caravans. Reynold, known for his brutality, even threatened to attack Mecca and Medina. Salahuddin could not remain silent. He declared jihad, a call not just to war, but to liberation. The decisive confrontation came at the Battle of Hattin in July 1187. The Crusader army, thirsty and exhausted, faced Salahuddin's disciplined forces near the Sea of Galilee. With brilliant strategy, Salahuddin cut off their access to water and surrounded them. The result was a crushing victory. The Crusader army was destroyed, their king captured, and Reynold, who had broken every treaty, was executed by Salahuddin himself. With the Crusaders shattered, Salahuddin marched to Jerusalem. The city, under siege, surrendered on October 2, 1187. Unlike the Crusader conquest of 1099, which was marked by a brutal massacre, Salahuddin showed extraordinary mercy. He allowed Christian residents to leave safely if they paid a ransom, and many who could not afford it were freed without payment. Churches were respected, and the holy sites were preserved. This act of mercy shocked Europe and earned Salahuddin admiration even among his enemies. But the struggle did not end there. News of Jerusalem's fall sparked the Third Crusade, led by King Richard the Lionheart of England, King Philip of France, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. For years, Salahuddin and Richard clashed in legendary battles, most famously at Acre and Arsuf. Though fierce, their rivalry was also marked by respect. Both leaders admired each other's courage and honor. Despite heavy fighting, the Crusaders failed to retake Jerusalem. In 1192, Richard and Salahuddin agreed to a truce. Muslims would keep Jerusalem, but Christian pilgrims could visit freely. This agreement highlighted Salahuddin's blend of strength and diplomacy, a warrior, yet also a man of peace. By the end of these wars, Salahuddin was not just a conqueror. He was a legend, celebrated in both the Islamic world and even in the courts of Europe as a symbol of chivalry and justice. After years of war and victory, Salahuddin returned to Damascus, weary but still devoted to his people. Despite ruling a vast empire stretching from Egypt to Syria, his personal life remained simple. He was not a king who drowned himself in luxury. Instead, he lived modestly, giving away much of his wealth in charity. In fact, at the time of his death, it is said that he did not even have enough money to cover his own funeral expenses, a true sign of his humility. In 1193, at the age of 56, Salahuddin fell ill. As his health declined, his followers gathered around him, mourning the loss they knew was near. On his deathbed, Salahuddin continued to recite verses from the Quran, remaining steadfast in his faith until the very end. His death shook the Islamic world. Here was a man who had united divided lands, defended Jerusalem, defeated the Crusaders, and yet remained humble and just. His funeral in Damascus was attended by thousands, soldiers, scholars, and ordinary citizens, all grieving the loss of their beloved leader. What made Salahuddin remarkable was not just his victories, but his character. He treated enemies with respect, forgave those who wronged him, and ruled with fairness. Even his fiercest rival, Richard the Lionheart, praised his honor. Legends of his mercy spread through Europe, where he was admired as much as he was feared. Salahuddin Ayubi's legacy lived on far beyond his lifetime. He became a symbol of justice, courage, and faith. For Muslims, he was the hero who liberated Jerusalem. For the world, he was a reminder that true greatness is not just in conquest, but in compassion. Centuries later, his story continues to inspire. In the halls of history, Salahuddin Ayubi is remembered not merely as a warrior, but as a man who combined strength with mercy, power with humility, and faith with justice.